More than 500,000 migrants and refugees are trapped inside Libya. Many face torture and abuse.
This might be a bit difficult for the audience, but they have to picture what it is. I've seen people that are living corpses.
After the fall of strongman Muammar Gaddafi, chaos engulfed the country. Human traffickers were given a free rein and illegal sea crossings soared. By 2015, unprecedented numbers began arriving on Europe's doorstep from Libya and elsewhere, until
the days of irregular migration to Europe are over.
Those caught at sea began to be taken back to Libya.
No person should be returned to a country where they will face torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment.
Stuck in an endless cycle of violence and abuse. This is Leyla's story. In 2015, Leyla and her husband escaped persecution and set out on a journey to safety, which would lead to abuse, torture, and ultimately suicide. To protect her identity, we have changed Leyla's name. She is played here by an actress.
I was married when I was 15 to an abusive man. My dad helped me to divorce him. Dad really took care of me, but he was murdered by Al-Shabaab. Alhamdulillah, I met Muhammad and got married again. But the same terrorists kidnapped Muhammad. Thanks to Allah, he escaped, but we couldn't stay in Somalia.
Many people want to come here to Europe because it's a safety net and a place with economic prospects. But it's certainly not the case for everyone. Like Leyla, she tells us she was bought and sold across 3 countries, changing owners 5 times, ending up in Libya, which is the ultimate hub in the business of trading humans.
We escaped Kismayo to Bosaso. There we took a boat headed for Yemen. In Yemen, we met a Somali man who said he would take us to a UN refugee camp. We didn't speak any Arabic, and he was one of us, so we trusted him. But he turned out to be a criminal. He sold us to a smuggler who demanded $4,000 to release us. We couldn't pay that, so he sold us like cattle to a Sudanese trafficker.
From Sudan, Leyla and her husband were sold into Libya, ending up in a human warehouse in Beni Walid. Beni Walid is a lawless town in western Libya, and it's the unofficial headquarters of the people smuggling industry. Most of the migrants and refugees who are trafficked into Libya are traded through this town.
They end up in the hands of smugglers, traffickers that will bring them to warehouses and torture them for weeks, for months, suffering terrible techniques of torture. They are filmed, they do videos in order then to ask money to the families and to the diaspora abroad.
There were maybe 1,000 of us in one room. They beat me and threatened to rape me or harvest my organs. They were so cruel, you can't imagine it. During the day, the smugglers would walk around the warehouse, smacking some of the women on the backside with a stick. When they felt this stick, that was it. They knew they'd been chosen, and so did their husbands. They couldn't do anything apart from wait, until that night when he would come back, take them to another room with all the others and raid them. One night, the smugglers got into a huge gunfight. Alhamdulillah, we managed to escape. We ran away to Zawiya, where we were able to get on a boat and finally leave that hell.
Tens of thousands of migrants and refugees have died trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe. But by this point, Leyla and Mohammed were so desperate, it was a chance they were willing to take.
There were about 140 people on the blow-up boat. I was so happy. Of course I was praying we would get to safety, but I knew the worst thing that could happen was only death, and that was a better option than Libya. Then we ran out of fuel, and the Libyan Coast Guard found us, and they forced us to get on their boat.
Leyla will be rescued by the abusive Libyan Coast Guard and taken back to a country where she is facing violations of her human rights. When you see these videos, you feel so powerless. It's very difficult.
Julia Tranchina is an immigration lawyer based in London. She's in constant touch with trapped refugees. She says returning Leyla and her husband to Libya is in breach of the international principle known as non-refoulement.
No person should be returned to a country where they will face torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, or other irreparable harm.
It is totally illegal, actually. And this is what we don't understand. We say that this is not a port of safety. UNHCR, EU, everybody says it. So we don't bring back people to Libya.
The UNHCR says that last year the Libyan Coast Guard intercepted more than 15,000 people and returned them to Libya. This year, that figure is lower, and it could be argued that Europe's policy to tackle illegal migration is working, but at what human cost?
Military buses took us from the port to what I can only describe as a prison. It was called Tariq al-Sikka Detention Center.
This is Tariq al-Sikka, where Leyla was held. There are dozens of centers like this, nominally run by the Libyan government. In Libyan law, there is no such thing as a refugee, so all migrants are treated as criminals.
I was locked in a small room with 50 other women and just a bucket for a toilet. It was really humiliating. We barely ate and there wasn't enough water. So many people were sick with tuberculosis. Some of them died in my arms. I was beaten up and we were tortured with electricity.
It's well known that physical, mental, and sexual abuse takes place inside these detention centers.
Refugees like Leyla risks being tortured, abused by guards, arriving high on drugs, drunk at night, abusing, beating up refugees in total impunity, deciding that they are going to intentionally starve them for a week, and there is no public outcry, this is not exposed.
With very few resettlement places available in Europe or elsewhere, it is only the lucky few who are evacuated from detention by the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR.
Some time passed, and we were told by UNHCR it would be our turn to leave next. So when the new list came out, Mohammed asked me to go and check it, but our names weren't there. I had to tell him that we had been passed over again. So many people who came in after us had already left. Mohammed was so upset and confused. He went to speak to the man from UNHCR, but was turned away. It was just before early evening prayers when it happened. I saw Mohammed. He was burnt. I was told he had covered himself in petrol and set himself on fire. The UNHCR came the next day and asked me for his registration papers. And that was it. Someone from the Libyan army told me that Mohammed's death was ordained by God and that I should accept it and let it go. They kept me there in the same prison for 3 months after he died.
The BBC contacted the UNHCR at the time to ask about what happened to Leyla and Mohammed. In an email response, they said that the tragic incident involving a Somali asylum seeker is unrelated to the visit of UNHCR. Further investigations showed that the deceased asylum seeker and his wife were both scheduled for an evacuation the next month. They were due to be evacuated. They're on a list for the coming month. I have that on email. So how did she end up staying there 3 months? This is the wife of a man who committed suicide. She's in a very traumatic state. Is she not vulnerable enough? Would you not have prioritized her?
The answer to that is because UNHCR is not making the rules. It's not controlling the time when people are eventually released from detention. There are people who have been communicated their eligibility decision based on the understanding at UNHCR that we would be able to reaccess them the next week, take them out, and put them into a transit center. It happened that we could not reaccess for whatever reason.
So you evacuated hundreds in that time, and she was due to be evacuated the coming month, but she wasn't. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, in that particular case, give me a chance to get back to you. I don't want to mislead you.
In an email follow-up, Mr. Cavalieri's office gave us no specific information about Leyla's case, but told the BBC that evacuations were suspended several times in 2018 because the UN's refugee center in Niger was full, creating a backlog. Leyla is now living in a tent in the UNHCR camp in Niger.
Europe often speaks of a migration crisis, but after months of listening to the desperate pleas for help from inside detention centers and the frustrations of humanitarian workers, it seems that the real crisis now is trapped inside of Libya.